This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Jim Lee, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hi, I'm Dan Jurgens, and you're listening to the Batman Universe.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of the TBU Comic Podcast. I am your host Dustin, and today I have with me...
This is Steph.
And we are bringing the latest comic news and comic book reviews from the weeks of May 12th through June 1st. As you well know, the last episode I was not here, so thank you to Steph, Ian, and Chris from Bat Books for Beginners, as well as he also does a segment on Batgirl to Oracle. Thank you to you three and Chris stepping in while I was on vacation. As usual, I go on vacation and the world erupts with news and all kinds of other stuff, and that's just how it works, and it doesn't matter. I mean, like, I try to plan my vacations for times where I think it would be not so busy, but that tends to never be happening. So I come back from vacation and I'm playing catch up for a while. So we have a bunch of stuff to cover. Some of this legitimately happened right after my vacation, but some of it did happen while I was on vacation. And we're going to cover all the comic news. We have a total of 3 books because, as you are probably well aware, this episode is a week later than you probably anticipated because, well, there was 5 Wednesdays in the month of May, so that means that this episode was spaced out 1 additional week. So we're going to cover the 3 titles we have. Ian is currently moving from one part of the country to another part of the country, so that's why he's not here today. He'll be back in 2 weeks when we do the next episode. And we have, like I said, a ton of stuff to cover. So let's jump straight into the news. So very first up, over the past 2 weeks, the first thing we've got is on May 14th, it was announced that there is another new original story that will be included with the Detective Comics number 1000 Deluxe Edition. It does seem just like yesterday, although it was last month, that I should say 2 months ago, that Detective Comics number 1000 was released, and then the very next day, DC announced the deluxe edition would be coming to stores in June, which, as we know, is just a couple weeks away. And as you're listening to this, literally about a week away. It seems like we already learned that there was going to be a story written by Robert Venditti with art by Steven Segovia. Now there's yet another story that's going to be included in the deluxe edition, which will feature a original story by Alan Grant with art by Scott McDaniel. This will be the first time the two have collaborated for a Bat book since 1996, when they collaborated in the Batman Chronicles. This story is called Through the Keyhole, which will feature many characters that Alan Grant co-created with Norm Breyfogle and John Wagner. Anarchy goes to war with the ventriloquist and Scarface while Batman tries to stop the conflict. Again, this deluxe edition will hit stores June 12th, and then will release everywhere else. They will release in comic shops, I should say, on June 12th, and then release everywhere else on June 18th. So if you were not thinking of picking up the deluxe edition, maybe that's yet another reason too. Personally, I am planning on picking up the deluxe edition because I think that, one, I'd like to have all the variants included in one version instead of having to purchase a gazillion copies of Detective Comics in 1000. As many longtime listeners may be aware, I used to collect every variant possible, and that became very impossible to do on a normal middle-class budget, and so this is my opportunity to get all those variants without having to worry about spending an enormous amount of money. So, yeah.
Will it still be collected in a trade Or was this deluxe edition considered the trade for?
I think this deluxe edition will be a hardcover. There probably will be a trade version of this that probably I don't know if it'll include all the variants. It'll surely include the original version. It'll probably include these 2 stories, but I don't know that it'll include all the variants included in it. Hardcovers, especially the deluxe editions, tend to try to include something that the other ones will not include. So I imagine the variants would be the first thing to go if need be.
But we won't get like a story with 1000 through 101, 02, 03 with all the.
Yeah, no, definitely
stories.
not.
Yeah.
The only thing I could think of is maybe, just maybe, when they eventually collect 1001 through whatever the Arcanite goes to, which I think is just 1004, and then that regard it could be collected through, or I think it goes through 1005 or 6. Once that is collected, they might include that Arkham Knight story from 1000, but I doubt it'll be collected anyway, or any other way, I should say. So, all right, so the other bit of news, real quick, May 14th, Steph actually posted up the numbers for April, the sales numbers, and if there was any doubt that the month to month was going to change, well, it happened exactly the way we all anticipated it would, because Detective Comics number 1000 obviously boosted up the month of March, and it was very high numbers, but of course you jump down from that ginormous sale of 500,000 issues, and then suddenly you're at a completely different spot. So, if you were interested in the sales numbers, go ahead and check those out over on the site. Steph, you want to tell everybody what your spotlight's going to be, which should be up by the time they're listening to this.
You're very good at written. Yes, it's going to be what villain sells the most Batman issues. And so I'm going to take a look at how many times the villain has appeared versus how many sales they have. So if they appear a lot, but they don't sell a lot of issues, then it's just DC trying to push them. But if, their sales to appearance ratio is higher on the sales, then that means that guy sells a lot. So we're going to see who sells a lot versus how many issues they get put out in. So if they don't sell a lot, but they appear a lot, then it's not very interesting. But if they sell a lot compared to everyone else's appearances, then they sell a lot more. So even though someone may not appear a lot, they still sell really well in comparison. Yes.
Yes. So as an example, if you were DC during the New 52 and you just happen to be pushing Penguin for some unknown reason, Penguin, so the idea behind this spotlight would be to check to see if Penguin legitimately raises sales and gets people to be buying the issue, or if Penguin is just something that DC seems to be pushing. And I'm going to spoiler out there, I guarantee you Penguin is just somebody that DC was pushing at the time, but yeah.
Another spoiler, Penguin is actually number 2 in appearances. He appears in 12.4% of the issues that I looked at. But of those issues sold, he only sells 10.8%. So his issues sold is actually less than the percentage of issues that he appears in.
Yeah. So, not a big surprise. There's no reason they need to keep pushing him, but they do. I don't know why. But yes, so the numbers for April are up. The spotlight will be up soon. So as you're listening to this, it may be up, or it'll be up right around the corner. And the numbers for May will be out in a couple weeks as well. So be on the lookout for TBU by the numbers. Next, May 15th, DC announced that there is a brand new miniseries that will be written and drawn by Neil Adams coming this August. Batman vs. Ra's al Ghul will be a 6-issue miniseries, and it will tell what is assumed to be an out-of-continuity story, because let's be honest, DC doesn't actually say all the time if it's out of continuity, but this feels very similar to Bane Conquest or some of the other mini-series that we've seen recently. And this story will feature a story dealing with Gotham City under siege by terrorists. Batman is aided by Deadman to find the source of the terrorist ring, while Ra's al Ghul volunteers his own security force to help the GCPD. Also, part of the same announcement is that DC will begin in August releasing facsimile editions, which quite honestly, I know that facsimile, the short version of that is fax, and I know what the word means, but I don't understand why it's called this as an edition. But basically, it's a reprinted version of a comic. The first one that will be released is Batman number 232, which will feature the story that introduced Ra's al Ghul. They also said in August there's going to be a Swamp Thing one, dealing with Swamp Thing's origin. So the thing is, there, I guess, at least what I've gathered from watching a video through the DC Universe, or DC Daily, I should say, is Dan DiDio was interviewed during a DC Nation report or whatever, and he said that the competition has had great success releasing reprinted versions of classic comics, and fans have been asking DC to do this for quite some time, so they've decided to embrace the fans and do it. Because it doesn't help them at all. Of course not. But yes, so reprinted versions of comics are coming out. By all means, if you're interested and you don't have access to reading it digitally, or you don't have a subscription to DC Universe, or you don't have the ability to purchase it through Comixology, then by all means pick up a printed version of this issue. And that's that. So, quite honestly, I'll give my 2 cents on this Batman Ra's al Ghul. I'm not super looking forward to it. The last Neil Adams story that we got, Batman Odyssey 1, was just as so many people have put it, we still don't really understand what happened, and it's been years and years later. Neil Adams is not necessarily, obviously he's best known for his art. Over the past 10 years, he's gotten more into wanting to write stories. I don't know if there's monetary reasons for that, or if there's just, I don't really understand what the reasons are. I assume that the artists that get big, if they want to be involved with writing, there's no reason they can't. They've seen how the process works. I'm sure they have their own ideas of what they would want to draw and things like that. But some of them are good at it, and some of them are not so good at it. That's honestly the truth. We've seen a lot of people cross over. More recently, we saw Tony Daniel right before the New 52, and then he obviously was heading up Detective Comics during the New 50, or when the New 52 launched. Jorge Jimenez has been just working with Scott Snyder, writing the story that's currently being published in Justice League. So there are artists who want to kind of spread their wings and do other stuff besides just being the person who draws the art, which is fine, but sometimes there's this is just my opinion, of course, but there's a conflict of interest when you want to draw something specific and then somehow you make the story just happen to work so that you can draw something specific, and that doesn't always play well for the overall story. And for some reason, Neil Adams has this weird tendency to include Deadman in a lot of the stuff that he does, and there's no real reason that Deadman has to be included. It's just he feels the necessity to do it, and I just don't understand it. And a lot of times it makes things slightly confusing because Deadman is embodying the body of somebody else. Is it Deadman? Is it not Deadman? It's giving me a headache just thinking about it because I'm being reminded of, I'm having like horrible PTSD flashbacks of Batman Odyssey, so...
Do you think, since he wants to draw this, do you think they'll delay books in order for him to catch up, or do you think they would get a fill-in artist if he was running behind?
No, I don't think he'll be running behind. I think DC is at the point now where they don't even let these creators do the books without having them all done ahead of time. One of the ones that just happened that I just forgot about, but then was thinking, what was the one that just happened? Was the Kelly Jones one that released, and with Scott Peterson and the Kings of Fear, and that one. I mean, could it have been delayed if necessary? I'm sure it could, but I'm pretty sure that they have such a leeway with these stories, and it helps that because they're out of continuity that it doesn't matter when they actually release. So, if it needs to be a story, for example, the Bane Conquest series by Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan, that series, Chuck Dixon had said that story was written, ages before it ever got published. So it wasn't something that, they were waiting on. It was just waiting for DC to actually publish it. And we've heard lots of different I shouldn't say old-time creators, but creators who are not currently involved in a lot of the current offerings from DC have said that, a lot of these titles, they have written stuff, and it just is kind of like waiting for DC to get around to doing it. In some cases, it makes sense the way they wait, and then there's other reasons like the Paul Levitt's Huntress miniseries that released after the New 52, but completely negated all of the new. It like gave her a new origin, but it wasn't part of the current New 52, mandate that they were trying to do. So, whatever. Yeah. Not looking forward to it, but we'll see. Yes. So, moving on, the next bit of news we have comes on August 17th. DC sent out a press release saying that there is a number of special covers coming in August. Obviously, we talked about last month, July will have villain variant covers to continue to feature the Year of the Villain. In August, however, there will be battle-damaged logo covers, as they put it, and these basically take the logos that we have seen so classic on so many different titles, and they just basically break them apart because they're being damaged. And in the press release, it said that from basically August forward for the next at least September, October, and then potentially November is kind of like the wrap-up point for a lot of this Year of the Villain stuff. The leading up to it, the logos are going to become progressively more damaged, which is kind of cool because it means each month the covers will be different. We also know that there will be special cardstock variants, which we've talked about in the past. They're $1 more. The normal covers will continue to feature the villains as the kind of the main focus, as a lot of the villains that are appearing in the series will be the characters that will be for the entire story arc. So if you want to see a gallery of the entire group of TBU covers that we cover here on the website, or of titles that we cover on the website that will be affected, we do have those over on the site. To be completely honest, it's almost all of the Bat books, and then there's also Justice League as well. So you can check those out over on the site. Gotta say, the cover, some of the logos are kind of cool, specifically because Detective Comics so recently got such a good-looking, in my opinion, logo. I kind of hope that once we get done with these battle-damaged logos, Batman gets a new logo, because I'm kind of sick and tired of the Batman logo. They should have gotten a new logo at the beginning of Rebirth, and the fact that they haven't is just annoying, but yeah. All right, May 17th, DC released their solicitations. This was for August. And basically, there's a bunch of different things, a lot of stuff we just talked about. But when you thought that just when you thought the Batman universe had a ton of new series just last month, DC added even more titles to the line that we cover here at TBU. August will mark the third month in a row to add even more titles to the Bat books. Year of the Villain continues into August and brings a variety of special covers, including ones featuring logos that are damaged, as revealed earlier that same day, which we talked about earlier. But while Year of the Villain is a major focus in the coming months, there are other things worth noting as well. As I mentioned earlier, there will be 2 new series. One of them will be the new 6-issue miniseries with Ra's al Ghul, Batman vs. Ra's al Ghul. Then there will also be Batman vs. Superman, which we talked about in the last episode. That series will be written by Joshua Williamson with art by David Marquez. The series will spin out of the events of The Batman Who Laughs, which also, surprisingly, was expanded to 7 issues, which we talked about in the last episode, but the solicitation was part of this, but it will release at the end of July. Outside of the main TBU titles, another title as part of the DC Zoom has been advance solicited for October. The second book in the Super Sons series, titled Super Sons Book 2, The Foxglove Mission, marks the first book in the line to receive a follow-up. There are, in fact, some things worth noting as far as the solicits and cover art reveals coming in August. First, there will be a Year of the Villain one-shot featuring Black Mask. This issue will be written by Tom Taylor. The solicit also mentions that despite getting away from the Teen Titans, he now comes in contact with Batwoman, who has been notably absent from a lot of the titles, except a minor appearance in Batman. Multiple other series continue to deal with the fallout of July's offer from the Year of the Villain, including Batgirl and Red Hood. There's also a new series spinning out of the Walmart Giants featuring the Titans. So we already knew that Batman was going to be, the Batman Giants were going to be collected in Batman Universe, but now the Titans ones are going to be collected as well. Also part of the release we already talked about the reprinted edition of Batman number 232. When looking over creator changes for the month, it seems that there are more than normal when it comes to the artists attached, but maybe it could just be that August is being used as a rest month for a lot of the titles. Last month, Doug Mankey was listed back on Detective Comics, but it appears that it is just for a single issue. Christian Duche was on the series for 2 issues coming into August, and Ram V will be managing Catwoman number 14 as he fills in for Joel Jones, along with artist Mirka Andolfo. Longtime Red Hood artist Kenneth Rocafort also makes an appearance in August on the latest issue of Red Hood Outlaw, while Travis Moore is back on Nightwing and Sean Chen is on Teen Titans. So all of those series have a normal artist, but none of them seem to be using their normal artist in August for some odd reason. So if you want the full list of solicitations and a gallery of a select group of covers and some of the variants that are going to be in stores in August, head over to the site and look for that in the comic news section. Quite honestly, there's not anything super remarkable about these. I'm not super looking forward to the Ra's al Ghul. It's kind of cool that the Super Sons series, the DC Zoom title, is getting a sequel so quickly, because the first title, it was one of the first titles that released back in April as part of the launch for DC Zoom and DC Inc. So it's good to see that it's getting a sequel, because some of those books I've encountered especially when finding some of these books that my son can enjoy, my son who's 8 years old. There was a series of books that Scholastic was putting out with Dustin Wen and Derek Friedolfs, and there were literally a year's time in between, and the problem is, like, kids' attention span is not able to withstand year gaps in between books. It just isn't. So I'm glad to see that this series is going to be getting a second book so quickly after, and I think there's at least one other book as part of the series that has already been announced as well, so good to see.
Nightwing is still the Nightwings.
Yes.
That's the one.
Unfortunately.
Well, it's not ending anytime soon.
Yes. All right, so our final bit of news is something that just popped up on May 24th, and...
Can I say it?
Yes, go ahead.
There's going to be a new Batman Catwoman series by Tom King!
Yes, so there is, in fact, going to be a new Batman Catwoman series, but there's a little bit of a interesting...
Yeah.
I guess the way we get to the point of the announcement. So, to be clear, throughout the week, rumors swirled around the internet that changes were happening to the Batbook, specifically Tom King's promised 105-issue run. The week prior, King gave an interview to The Hollywood Reporter stating that the intent was to stay on Batman and complete his story. The specific quote worth noting was, "What we're going to do for the last 15 issues is something no one's ever seen for the character." Obviously, this seemed like a pretty big deal, and again cemented King's earlier comments about staying on the title to finish his 4+ year-long story that he has been building forever. However, on that specific Tuesday, so just about 4 days before this announcement from DC was released, rumors surfaced online from Bleeding Cool that Tom King had been unceremoniously removed from the Batman series, and his last issue would be Batman number 85, scheduled for this December. While the reasoning for his removal was exasperated by a variety of different sites, DC chose to remain silent while the storm passed through. That is, until May 24th. DC Comics confirmed, extremely late in the day, might I add, because we at TBU, I normally close up shop about 3 p.m. Central Time, just because I've got other stuff going on, and it's Friday, so I try to get out of here early. And they just happened to send out this press release like 2 hours after I had already closed up shop, so that was awesome on them, because they were trying to get this in right under the wire before the weekend, so that it would kind of go by the wayside. Yeah. DC Comics confirmed that Tom King will in fact be leaving Batman with issue number 85. While the press release pushed the fact that he will in fact continue his story elsewhere, the main takeaway is that plans inside the company must have changed in a very short amount of time. There were rumors a few months back that we obviously addressed here on the TBU Comic Cast that DC be reducing the number of titles they publish every month. No real sign of this seemed to be true until this announcement. In the press release, Batman, which is normally DC's top-selling title, will go from selling 2 issues per month to only selling 1 issue per month. This is notable because even though the addition of the other series, the Batman Catwoman series, the series is not likely to maintain the consistent numbers that Batman does every month in and month out. The main focus of this press release was for DC to ensure fans that Tom King will still complete his story that he started back in June of 2016. In January of 2020, that is, a new 12-issue miniseries will launch called Batman Catwoman. The series will be written by King and will be the vehicle for King to deliver what he referred to as something no one's ever seen. King will be joined by Clay Mann, who will be providing the art for the monthly series. King confirmed on Twitter that this series will, in fact, be set in continuity and described the upcoming series in the press release, which I'm not going to bother reading. It's also worth noting that despite the press release stating that in regards to the other Bat books, and I swear this is what it said, will continue into 2020 with no other immediate changes to their shipping schedules. There was a retailer who tweeted out that DC had notified retailers that there will no longer be any titles shipping twice per month come this January. This means there will also be a change because Detective Comics is also currently shipping twice per month and, of course, will require a change of some sorts in order to fall in line with those comments. So, Batman Catwoman is coming in 2020 and will wrap up Tom King's Batman story in fewer issues than he originally planned, which may or may not be a bad thing, and Batman will begin shipping once per month, but there still seems to be more to the story that we may never know for quite some time. There is some promotional art that was released, which could have been potentially the hold-up for the announcement, although I'm convinced it more has to do with DC publicity trying to make sure that this is just forgotten through the weekend. But there is a original Batman Catwoman piece of art that is over on the site if you want to check that out. I do like the art, and Clay Mann is a great artist. If you've been reading Heroes in Crisis, you know exactly what the man is capable of. He's a phenomenal artist. If you haven't been reading Heroes in Crisis, I strongly suggest just Google Clay Mann Heroes in Crisis title page, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The guy has done some insane stuff with Heroes in Crisis, like crazy detailed stuff, and I'm kind of interested in seeing, what happens. Hopefully we get something really cool. Before I give any more of my thoughts, Steph, what are your hopes for this series?
Well, I have to say, I went on a bit of an emotional roller coaster because the first thought was Tom King's off. What does this mean? Because what is that, 20 issues short of what he was going to do? Yep. And I was like, they can't finish the story. Like, at the rate he tells stories, they can't finish that up. He can't finish it up like that. And so that was just really upsetting. And then when I realized that they were going to continue it in 12, so that means he's only about 8 issues short. He's going to have to somehow get rid of 8 issues. That's not near as bad as getting rid of 20. But I don't know. I was comforted. I like that it's going to be a Batman Catwoman book because at least that confirms that she's coming back. She's not going to be in Mexico forever. I wonder, I don't understand why, because I thought maybe it was because, you hear a lot about him getting harassed online, and I thought maybe he just finally snapped and had enough, but it doesn't sound like it was his choice at all. Do we know a little bit more about what prompted this?
So the only details that have released since this is that he has... I think the thing is that he had every intention of staying on till 105, and as we know, like I said, reading through the news bit, the original plan obviously was to stay on 105. He gave that interview, which probably wasn't exactly... It published the week before this whole thing happened, but it was probably actually happened 2 weeks prior. The report from Bleeding Cool was that something, like there was a bunch of talk about this happening at MegaCon, which was happening the weekend prior to all of this, and Tom King was one of the featured guests there. And I think what happened was, and all this is honestly the way I think it all worked out, was that DC decided they didn't want to do the double shipping per month. I think that it's become too much of a thing for the remaining titles. I mean, and let's be clear, the only remaining titles that are still double shipping: Wonder Woman, Flash, Detective Comics, Batman. Those are the only four, and Justice League. Sorry, and Justice League, and those are the only 5 titles that are still publishing twice per month. But if you look at those titles, Detective Comics is going through artists like there's no tomorrow. It's been like that since the beginning. You know, while they are doing arcs and things like that, if you look at the way Peter Tomasi has been structuring the stuff that's coming up after the Arkham Knight story, we've got a 2-issue story arc. We've got another 2-issue story arc. There's another thing going on. You can tell that they're strained because it's very difficult to keep 3 artists attached to a series. That still, even though they're releasing twice per month, it's not common for a artist or an art team to be on a title for this amount of time and to work that far into the future. So you look at like a book like Batgirl, which releases once a month. They have an art team that normally stays on the book for at least 6 issues, potentially 12. Most of the time it's 12, but every once in a while you'll get like 1 or 2 issues within that 12 where someone fills in, and maybe the writer creates a story that is, that works as a standalone story. But when it's the double ship books, you can't really do that because you have to have somebody come in and do a story that still fits within the larger story. So writers have to be they have to be writing stuff farther in advance. We know this specifically because of a lot of the things we've seen over the last couple of years. Tom King specifically needed time off in October to work on some television pilot scripts that he was working on, and that prevented him from completing the 2 issues that would then release in February of this year. That's how far out this stuff goes. So that's why we had the 2 issues that were written by Joshua Williamson, the Price issues, or I guess whatever they call them now, the 2 issues that would feature Gotham Girl. Those issues were basically Joshua Williamson filling in for Tom King because Tom King needed the month of October off. So think about how far in advance it is. That's like 5 to 6 months in advance in order to just get this stuff going. There's not a lot of opportunity then to shift the story in a different direction if it's not being well received either, and that's a concern too. So, but then you look at other titles. You look at Aquaman and Wonder Woman and Flash, who are like literally the only other characters that have withstanded the slim down of getting rid of the double ships. And Wonder Woman they made a big deal about Wonder Woman getting G. Willow Wilson, and Kelly Sue DeConnick came onto Aquaman, but I think that their stories have been broken up because of the way that they've been releasing, because they're still double shipping. Flash has had multiple situations where they're telling a specific story and then something else has to get filled in so that before they can move on to the next story. And quite honestly, when you look at Tom King's stories, we've complained here on the podcast that there's a lot of issues that release that feel like, what's the reason this is here? Why does this exist? And I'm not just talking about the Nightmares issues. I'm talking about like some of the other like just smaller story arcs that he's had. Some of them have a purpose, and some of them are just kind of like, well, they're here. What is the reason they're here? And I honestly feel like it's just to take up time and to take up, well, not time, but take up space in the larger number of 100. So if he's only got 20 issues left after he hits 85, and to be clear, 85 wraps up Year of the Villain. So Year of the Villain will be complete, so it's not like that's being chopped up or anything like that. But the going forward, especially because it was going to 100, Tom King said that the last 15 issues were going to be something that he had to run by higher-ups at DC, Warner Brothers, and AT&T because of something big that was going to change this character for the generation. When you look at larger things that have changed characters for generations, you're talking like like Nightfall. Batman his back gets broken and Azrael takes over. You're talking like No Man's Land, where the entirety of Gotham City is turned upside down, and it takes a long period of time to tell the story that is No Man's Land. You're looking at like a thing like Hush, where you've got a character that kind of consumes a book and takes up a huge amount of focus from all the other titles. You're talking, like Batman R.I.P. and Battle for the Cowl, and then the whole story of Batman, Return of Bruce Wayne and all that. That was a massive story that took like a massive amount of time. These are big stories, and quite honestly, like as much as Scott Snyder has a huge impact on the Bat world, a lot of the stuff that he's written, and I'm not saying this with any disregard to Scott Snyder, he's a friend of TBU, but none of his stories were really generational impactful stories that's going to change Batman, unless you look at some of the other things. But some of those, like Batman or Joker being immortal and all of this, but the problem is that none of that stuff was super well received, so it's not going to be necessarily remembered. Tom King, on the other hand, the assumption is that something big could happen as far as maybe he reveals himself as or who he is under the cowl, or that he actually does get married to Catwoman, and that's going to be the thing. So, while I'm completely okay with any of those, none of that justifies him not being able to finish on Batman. However, he has become a much more sought-after writer recently. He's won Eisner's 2 years in a row. He won the Eisner for his short story, the Ace the Bat Hound short story. He won an Eisner last year. He's nominated for Eisners again this year for Heroes in Crisis and Batman. And he's a sought-after writer. He's done a lot of critically acclaimed series like Omega Men, Sheriff of Babylon, and The Vision over at Marvel. He's in demand. And I think ultimately DC also has a specific amount of time left on his exclusive contract. And I think what it came down to was, while his exclusive contract would obviously take him to the 105 issues or whatever, it could prevent him from doing something else, some other series. While he could do Batman double shipping and Heroes in Crisis, if he does Batman a Batman monthly compared to twice a month, he could do two other series that could be super critically acclaimed and big sellers for DC. So I think that part of it was that DC wanted to change, and not do double shipping. I've heard through industry reports and things like that, the retailers in general aren't huge fans of the titles that ship twice per month, even though they do sell well, or they sell relatively better than other series, because the problem is it doesn't give other books a chance to potentially get bought by customers who are coming in. Because if they're coming in and they're buying two issues that are costing $4 a piece, that's $8 they're spending. If they're not spending $8, they're only spending $4, they could put that $4 towards a different series, and it gives other books a chance. I've heard that. I don't know why DC would change that. I think it has more to do with the creator problems that we've seen over the past time. And I think they ultimately decided we're just going to stop doing the double shipping. And then, of course, because Tom King was at MegaCon when this may have fall through the grapevine, maybe he was asked, or maybe someone mentioned it, and then it turned into something bigger than it was, because he was the only one who was being addressed, because he was the only one present to be addressed about the book, or being, the book, him coming off the book, because he was going to come off the book because it was no longer twice per month, because otherwise there's no way for him to finish the story. So I know that's a very long-winded answer, but I'm sure that's probably what it is. He wants to finish the story, but if he waits, or if he actually had to wait to get those last 20 issues of the series done, he'd be on the book for more than a year than he planned on it. So,
But I'm very excited about a Batman Catwoman book. It comes at a great cost, but it's okay. I'm just curious who they're gonna get.
I am too. I mean, we've obviously on the cast have hypothesized of who could take over after 100 or 105, and now obviously it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So in the next few months, we will probably hear who's taking over Batman, and as it will be a monthly. The assumption is that Peter Tomasi's not going anywhere. He's going to be on Detective Comics for a little, for a while. And obviously him being the Detective Comics going monthly will be able to have a more consistent artist schedule for that title. So maybe Doug Mankey comes back on for a more extended amount of time rather than just plugging in one issue here, since he's already done a full arc that was done way in advance. But it'll be interesting to see because obviously Tom King going on... And the other part of this, and I have to say, this feels reminiscent to something that happened with Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder was announced to come off of, he was done with Batman. 52 was his last issue, and then almost immediately afterwards, they had started hyping that him and Capullo had some other Batman series that they were going to do, and they hyped it for a while. And obviously, we've just gotten the first issue, which is Batman: The Last Night. Or Last Night on Earth, #1, which just released, which we'll talk about later on in Greater Gotham, but they started hyping that because they were coming off of the main series and they weren't done. It's also the exact same thing that happened with Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison was done on Batman, and then he came back and was doing Batman Incorporated. So I feel like when a writer comes off the Batman main series, it's like their gradual release from the Bat universe by going on to a mini series for a short amount of time to kind of like wrap up their thoughts. So it's happened multiple times in the course of this podcast, so I'm sure whoever's coming on, to be honest, DC does have to get somebody to come on for a significant amount of time. Obviously, someone coming on number 86, they could go for 14 issues, which is about 2 trades, and that would take us to number 100. And I could honestly see that being the case, especially with it being monthly. And then that makes way for potentially somebody even bigger to come with number 100. It'll just be interesting to see who they get to fill in that 15, not 15, but 14 issue gap between Tom King and number 100. So, yeah. All right, so... spent a little bit too much time on that, but I will say that there is a question later on during the questions and answers that asks us to talk all about this. So hey, I've already talked about it, so don't worry, I won't double talk it, I promise. All right, so with that being said, that actually is all of the news from the past 2 weeks. So we're going to dive into our first review, which is Batman number 71. Batman number 71, written by Tom King, art by Mikel Janin and Jorge Fornes. The issue opens with Batman sitting in the Batcave with his cowl off and his hand on his brow as an intruder alert blares on the monitors in front of him. The story then flashes earlier on the roof of the police headquarters, where Batman activates a red bat signal as Gordon tells him to get off his roof. Back in the cave, Bruce slowly puts on his cowl and climbs the stairs towards Wayne Manor. In the past, Gordon is visited by his daughter, who he tells about his encounter with Batman and the red bat signal, after which Barbara disappears. In the present, Batman enters his study as a disembodied voice welcomes him and tells him that they have been waiting for him. In the past, Barbara swings through the city as Batgirl, notifying other members of the Bat family of the red bat signal. Tim Drake, Damian, Huntress, Signal, and Orphan say they are on their way, as does Batwoman, who explains she is out of the country and 12 hours out. Rick Grayson, and Jason refuse, and a single panel shows Stephanie in bed receiving a text message. Batman walks into the dining room to find Bane sitting at one end of the long table with Thomas Wayne's Batman standing over him as he is served by Alfred. In the past, Batman stands on the edge of a roof as he meets with Batgirl, both Robins, Signal, Orphan, and Huntress. Bane tells Batman to have a seat as Bruce starts reciting to Bane that he's going to break his back. Bane tells Alfred to serve Bruce some food, and Batman knocks the tray out of his hands. In the past, Batman explains to his troops about Bane's plan. At Wayne Manor, Batman knocks over the table, again stating to Bane that he is going to break his back, and punches Bane across the chin. In the past, Batman and his team get ready to attack Arkham Asylum. In the present, Bane laughs off Batman's punch and throws his own punch at Batman, knocking him to the floor. Batman and his team arrive at Arkham to find the hospital in order with no sign of escaped villains. In the present, Batman is helped to his feet by Alfred, who explains to him that while he understands his impulse to fight, this time, for the first time, Batman has lost. In the past, on a rooftop, Batman's team confronts him, stating that there is no record of Bane taking over the asylum, and that they have spoken to Alfred, who, they say, has told them that he was never attacked by Thomas Wayne. Tim Drake reaches out to Batman, offering to help him deal with his pain over Catwoman leaving him. the issue ends with a split page, with Batman savagely hitting Tim as his team looks on in horror on one side, while on the other side, Bane and Thomas Wayne's Batman looks on as Alfred explains to Batman that Bane has broken him. All right, so I have to point out the last panel of featuring Tim Drake. It is clearly very reminiscent of that wonderful, highly memed piece of art out there of Dick Grayson being slapped by Batman from, I think, the 50s or 60s. That was interesting to see. There's clearly something going on as far as either Alfred is being mind controlled, or because he's lying to the allies, or something else is going on, because it feels like Batman is the only one who sees what's really going on, or is seeing what he thinks is actually going on. So it brings up that idea that I had a couple episodes ago, where is Batman actually awake, or is this still part of the nightmare?
Yeah. And because of the two different art styles, it creates a discontinuity between the two stories, even though, they're happening one in the past, one in the present, although we assume, not by more than a few hours probably. There's almost a feeling of two realities happening at the same time. And it actually was a bit of a trip reading it, because at first I didn't quite realize that one had happened before the other. So it was almost like, we have got two realities, which one's actually true? But even understanding that one happens earlier, there's still almost, I don't know, twists your brain a lot. And I would have no trouble if you told me, next episode or next issue, yes, it was all a dream. I'd believe that. Like, it's Batman's really being taken through the runner, through the loop, and it's just, poor guy. But
yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, the thing is, it definitely falls in line with the idea that something's not right. Mm-hmm. Either what the Allies is seeing is being like some sort of illusion of what, compared to, illusion different than what Batman is seeing, or Batman is being forced to believe something because of illusion or mind control, or, I mean, let's be honest, there's almost a reason, there's almost a connection to illusion, mind control, hypnotics, gas, all kinds of stuff that is possible to explain any of this, which, I mean, most certainly will explain something, because how can everybody not know what's going on, but he's the only one who does, unless none of this is actually happening, but then he's still got to be affected by it. So there's got to be some sort of explanation as far as that goes. The other thing I wanted to talk about is I know you guys talked about this on the last episode, but I wanted to talk about it while I was here. Why do you think that Bane is, or that that Thomas Wayne's Batman is working with Bane? Like, what is the reason he thinks that this is all good? We've seen like these, at the end of Flashpoint, he writes a heartfelt letter to Bruce. We've seen him during the Button say, like, Bruce, don't be Batman, live your life, enjoy your life. Why do you think that it just feels like he's turned to, like, well, one, he feels like he's like the henchman of Bane at this point, which feels completely out of character from everything we've seen in the past. But the other part of it is like, what would compel Thomas Wayne to do this to his son, even if it's not specifically his son, but it is somebody that he has treated as his son in the past?
Golly, I don't know. And you know what? I had these terrible, like, half thoughts. But if you remember in Batman 50, Skeets is there. And so if Skeets is evil, maybe, because obviously the Thomas Wayne that existed in the Flashpoint universe, like, he can't exist. So maybe Skeets did something to create an evil alternate timeline and then got Thomas Wayne from that timeline and brought him back. So he's kind of a paradox existing here. I don't know. It's a little weird thought, but all I can think is that this Thomas Wayne is just someone different than what we've become accustomed to through Flashpoint stories. because or he's mind washed. He's just really, because everything we learned about Thomas Wayne is that he is basically the will of Batman. He has a lot of Bruce's characteristics, even though he may be a little more violent, but he's not a henchman, and he's not a peon, and he's not a yes man. Like, it's so, I don't know what it is, but something is going on that's just weird.
Yeah, I saw this theory online that the reason why Thomas is falling in line with Bane is because he believes that this is the only way to convince Bruce to legitimately stop being Batman and to live his life. And when I saw that theory, I was like, that just doesn't seem, one, in character, and two, why would he go to the lengths that Bane is going to ensure that he goes and lives a happy life? What kind of happy life is he going to live after Bane destroys him? Like, I don't see that theory as a possibility. The more likely thing is, like you were saying, like, potentially Skeets, or maybe there is, like, some other timeline. You know how, like, and the problem is, of course, this stupid time travel stuff always, is super hard to explain and super hard to understand, and half the time doesn't even make any sense, but you just have to go with it because there's no real way of explaining it. But maybe the idea is that, you always hear when you create a time, when you go back in time, when you go forward, you're not going forward to your timeline, you're going forward to a new timeline. Maybe the intent is, because they've gone back and forth, that the version of Thomas Wayne that that originally wrote that heartfelt note at the end of Flashpoint, told Bruce to have a happy life, maybe it's not the same Thomas Wayne. Maybe it's one that, thinks that Bruce is making horrible decisions because he hasn't listened, or like that, and it's not the same Thomas Wayne. That there's that possibility. The other possibility is that this isn't Thomas Wayne at all. Again, it's an illusion to screw with Bruce's head, and it's like you said, like potentially some other. It could even be like a hologram. Well, I'm not going to go as far as a hologram, because let's be honest, the last issue, which had Bane and Thomas wrestling for some idiotic reason, kind of doesn't make any sense to the idea that it's not actually Thomas Wayne.
Yeah.
But I could chalk that up to whatever. I mean, like,
I can only assume he's playing a role for some alternative purpose. Maybe he's using, again, really, really, really tough love, abusive love. Using Bane to get to Bruce and then take over once he's hit a certain point in the plan. But golly, they're really screwing with him. I couldn't do that to my kid.
Yeah, I'm not. And the thing is, like, to be fair, if Thomas is legitimately like, this is just straight tough love and this is what he thinks needs to happen, to be fair, and I hate to say this because, I don't want to paint a bad picture because we don't know the whole story, but like, that would be Tom King really, like, crapping on Jeff Johns' version of Thomas Wayne's Batman and Brian Azzarello's version of Thomas Wayne's Batman, which, let's be honest, Jeff Johns and Brian Azzarello's, which was formulated during Flashpoint and Flashpoint Batman, that was pretty much the same character. But if that character is meant to be the same character that we're seeing here, where this is what he thinks, I don't think that was the same character that we saw back in that story.
Yeah.
And while everything can be explained by multiverse and Dr. Manhattan snapping his fingers, I'd hate that could be the actual legitimate reason behind some of these potential changes. So here's hoping that maybe it's not actually Thomas Wayne, or if it is, he's going along with it because the MacGuffin is going to be that he screws Bane over in the end.
Yeah, I don't know. I do want to go back, though, to the last point and say that the only reason that the Bat family doesn't really believe him is that Alfred didn't see anything, and we saw Alfred get hit from behind. So I think that can easily be explained by Alfred legit didn't see anything. But the fact that there's no evidence at all at Arkham is just so mind-boggling. Like, what is Bane doing to the staff to cover that up? That's pretty nuts to me.
Well, the problem is there's so many different people that were in that scene in Batman number 50. Psycho Pirate has the ability to have people see things that or to affect their emotions, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
So, like, maybe that has something to do with it, because we haven't really seen Psychopirate. I know that Psychopirate is supposed to be coming up in one of the issues soon, because I remember seeing his name in one of the solicitations. So, I don't know. I mean, like, obviously there's a combination of a bunch of different people here that you have to wonder, why are they here? What is the purpose they're here? How could they possibly be working together? I still don't see why Joker would be working with Bane. I don't know, and to be fair, I don't know why Riddler would work with Bane either, because Riddler is all about trying to make sure he's the smartest person, so I don't know why he would go along with a plan like this from Bane. So, I mean, there's definitely some disconnect, and there's definitely a bunch of answers that still need to get answered as far as that, just that one panel from Batman 50. So here's hoping, at least by the time Year of the Villain's done, we actually see the conclusion or like the explanation of some of this stuff, and maybe the Batman Catwoman stuff will obviously play out in the Batman Catwoman series, but the stuff with Bane gets resolved by the end of issue 85, because if it doesn't, I don't know that the Batman Catwoman series is really going to be the best place to wrap that up. So,
do you want to talk about Tim getting punched, or are we okay with Tim getting punched?
I'm not okay with Tim being punched, but I honestly think that Batman is so off his rails right now that it's not, I'm not going to sit here and say it's like outside the realm of possibility. I mean, let's be fair. Everybody is telling Batman that he's nuts, and he's convinced that he's not, and whether he actually is nuts and someone's controlling him or someone's controlling everybody else, I mean, he's pissed. I mean, also, he slaps the tray out of Alfred's hand, and the same thing, because he can't understand why Alfred's serving Bane and Thomas. So, I mean, something's going on, and it's confusing because we don't know what in the heck is going on, and it feels like so much time is being, there's so much jumps in the time periods that these issues are happening that it's slightly confusing and annoying, because it doesn't really feel like we're getting somewhere to answer any of these questions. It's like we open up the issue, we get like one answer, and then we get 6 more questions. And to be fair, I really, really, really don't like stories like that, especially when you have to wait a couple weeks in between the next chapter. So, I mean, it's one thing if it's like a collected novel and you're just going to the next story, and let me be clear, this is Tom King's like thing. This is what he does. Look at Heroes in Crisis, which has wrapped now, and we'll talk about that later, but that entire story was telling us a very specific story that will work perfectly as a collected story, but individually as chapters month to month, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the same way. So alright, so Batman number 71, I'm going to give this one a total of 3.5.
Yeah, I was thinking 3. I was a little too frustrated with this, but it's the middle, or it's the middle. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen next, but for now, 3 out of 5.
All right, and over on this website, Paul gave it 4, so that's going to give the issue a total of 3.5 out of 5 Batarangs. Let's move into our next book, Detective Comics. Detective Comics number 1004, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Andrew Walker. Dr. Jeremiah Arkham tells Batman and Damian more about his daughter Astrid Arkham. Jeremiah tells him that Ingrid Carlson was the source of hope in his life. She was a general care physician at Arkham Asylum. Her empathy and kindness for the inmates was legendary. Whenever a patient complained of any pain, she would go above and beyond to help them. Her patients respected her for they sensed her purity of spirit. Her passion for medicine and caregiving for Arkham's troubled reignited Jeremiah's long-dormant ethics. They agreed on a mission to bring light to those prisoners who lived in the darkness. She pushed him to be the doctor he always hoped he would be. She also pushed him to be a better man, and he fell in love with her. He proposed, and she accepted. Jeremiah could not have imagined a more perfect life. They shared their personal and professional lives together. Everything was going right until they found out they were pregnant. They realized that this new life should be far away from the influence of Arkham. Even though the inmates were in recovery, Jeremiah could feel something horrible might happen. Ingrid refused. She insisted that she would stay by her patients as long as she could because she would be soon away on maternity leave. Then Jeremiah's nightmare came to life. A riot broke out in Arkham when a new prisoner arrived, and Jeremiah became separated from his wife. While worrying about his wife and his soon-to-be child, he scanned the security cameras hectically in hopes of finding Ingrid. Instead, he spots Batman on the cameras. Out of the chaos, he heard his wife's screams. He ran to where she was and heard a new scream, the scream of baby Astrid. Some of the inmates helped and protected Ingrid as she gave birth. Solomon Grundy kept Ingrid safe. Clayface used himself to provide privacy. Poison Ivy guided her through the delivery, and Joker and Harley delivered the baby. Jeremiah would always be grateful for this unusual birthing team. For one moment, there was peace in this riot. This piece fled as quick as it came, though, as a batarang flew through the air and severed Ingrid's major veins and arteries. Grundy, filled with rage, and tore off the heads of this new inmate. He did this because the new inmate was throwing batarangs that were on the ground from where Batman threw at others earlier. Thus, he killed Ingrid with his careless attitude. Finally, Jeremiah's worst day of his life ended. He kissed his wife goodbye and took Astrid in his arms. They moved on. He raised Astrid in Arkham, protected from the rest of Gotham. She was a curious child. She found secret ways to move throughout Arkham on a whim. Sometimes these secret passages brought her to sub-cellars where stolen loot was kept. Other times she came upon mayhem only the Batman could stop. One of the few constants in Astrid's life was Batman. She witnessed his methods often. Astrid sensed the inmate's fear when he entered the asylum. She wanted to help fight that fear, and many of the inmates were happy to help. As she got older, she found out the truth about her mother. Her mother was murdered by a batarang. This led her to train to become the opposite of everything Batman stood for. She sought after teachers in the arts of war and science so that she might take Gotham back from Bat and usher in a new age of enlightenment. Batman asks why she has not learned the new inmate was the one who murdered her mother. Jeremiah tells him it was easier just to have her hate Batman. She was already surrounded by people who feared him. Batman wonders why Astrid left so soon, since this was her main base. As he observes the area, he sees a pipe. However, there is no water running through the pipe. He breaks it and pulls out a detailed map of Gotham. On the map, the highest point of Gotham is circled. Elsewhere, Astrid tells her forces the eclipse approaches tonight, and it is time for the Knights of the Sun to take their positions against the dark. One of her minions hands her a sphere of light, and as she takes it, Batman and Robin fly down to her position. Alright, so Detective Comics number 1004. Alright, so I wasn't here last time, so I'll just quickly give my opinion of the Arkham Knight being Astrid Arkham. Don't care. That's that. I mean, to be fair, I didn't have any real super great guess as to who it could be, or have real crazy high expectations of who it could be. I'm glad it was somebody. I mean, we all assumed it was going to end up being somebody that nobody really knew. My only complaint is that, especially after this issue, Astrid is born as Batman's already in, out and about fighting crime, and somehow she is a full-grown woman, presumably in her 20s, and she has absolutely no possibility of being as old as she is, because Batman hasn't been Batman for 20-something years. Yeah. So that's my only major complaint with her being who she is, and the explanation as to how she came to be. I also think it's a little bit of a stupid thing for Jeremiah to just be like, well, I never told her that Batman didn't kill her mom because, hey, it was just easier. Like, what? What? Yeah. Really?
And the fact that, okay, so he's all, I don't want the baby near Arkham while his wife was pregnant, yet after she gave birth, he's okay with the Joker reading her bedtime stories. That was weird.
Yeah, it's super weird, and it makes absolutely no sense.
No.
In terms of his character, like, he's super upset about everything that happened. The worst day in his life is when she dies, the baby's born, and like, while those villains helped with the delivery and the baby came to be born with no issues, it still was the reason why all of this stuff happened was because she was in Arkham while this horrible situation happened with the riot. So while I guess someone could sit there and point the blame at Batman, isn't it still the blame of the parents for allowing her, Ingrid to stay at Arkham Asylum while this happened? I don't understand why Jeremiah's explanation of, well, it just was easier to do that. It makes no sense. It really doesn't. The timeline part is the thing that makes the least amount of sense. That was the thing I was most frustrated by, because in the larger scheme of things, it's not like she's a 12-year-old kid who suddenly has raised up this militia of people to fight off Batman. And she also doesn't have, I get that she wants to do something different than Batman, but she's also friends with all these villains. So how exactly is that going to change? Knowing that the villains have, a good side, okay, then why not try to rehabilitate them instead of trying to defeat the one person who's trying to keep the city safe? I don't understand. The problem is I'm lost as to what exactly her mission is. Her mission is to stop Batman because Batman it's like the old tale of, well, is it Batman who creates the villains, or is Batman there to stop the villains? And while I completely appreciate the story that's trying to be told, I feel like there's some massive gaping holes with this situation of getting somebody to counter Batman and say, well, we're going to try to do things differently, because I don't understand what her real mission is, and I also know that there's not a lot of issues left to tell this story, so I don't know. I don't understand what they're trying to accomplish here. If she, in fact, believes that Batman is causing these villains to exist, there's no explanation as to why Batman would have killed her mom. If Batman killed her mom by accident, it was still the villains that brought Batman into Arkham. Yeah. It wasn't... Batman didn't just show up in Arkham and then the riot started and then he was forced to fight. So, there's big, huge problems with the explanation of why this is happening.
Yeah, the timeline of her being... Unless she's, super young and only looks 20-ish. Maybe she's in her late teens still. That means Batman's been around for a really, really, really long time.
Plus, it's not like Jeremiah's rich, so somehow she goes off and seeks all these teachers of war and science, and it's okay, so how did she pay for that? Batman has a reason that he could go do it because he was rich, but her dad is a doctor at an asylum. He's not rich. I understand that the Arkhams had, the history of the Arkhams, they've been around, but they were never rich. So I don't understand where she would just be able to go off and do this, and how she would have enough time to go off and study all these, these ways of, being like Batman essentially, but then still be able to raise up a cult of people to follow her too. What? Where is she getting the funding for this? Where is it coming? I guess if the explanation is, well, because she explored Arkham and found stolen loot, why are villains hiding loot underneath Arkham? Why would they do that?
Yeah, the timeline and... what was my other thought? And so if you get all your news from one source, you're going to have a very biased one point of worldview for your world. If all you do is listen to NPR, then that's the only opinion you're going to have, right? So she's grown up in Arkham with her dad not telling her the truth. So the only truth she has is what the villains tell her. So in that case, I can see where her agenda started. But if she did go off and learn and study, you'd think at some point she'd hear another side to the story. It just seems a little weird that her only contacts in her entire life have been villains and her lying father. That just seems a little strange. She never went to school. She never accidentally saw a news report about how Batman saved people. I don't know. It seems a little weird.
Well, I appreciate the idea that they were trying to go for something. I feel like the build-up was a little bit too grand for this character just being it, which is fine. After the slight letdown of that whole situation last summer with the character that Brian Hill was trying to reveal, and it was just kind of oh, okay, whatever. It's not like I had high expectations for this character, but at the same time, I'll say this, okay? I honestly think that this issue by itself was beautifully told. If you just look at it, within that small bubble of it's just this story, don't look at the stuff that's not being told here because it's not going to work and make sense. The art in this issue was amazing. The entire backstory was crafted really well. But, like, I have no choice but to look at the larger picture of things because that's what we do here. We look at the larger picture. And the larger picture has too many problems and too many glaring holes to like, you know, make it make sense. So, I don't really have a lot to say outside of that. Do you have anything else to say?
I loved the villains coming together and birthing the baby and protecting Ingrid. I actually thought that was awesome and really cute. And I don't know. It was almost like, yeah, this new guy, who does this moron think he is? He doesn't know how things work at Arkham. You know, he's creating this whole riot, destroying it. I don't know. I just thought it was really cute. And I think I liked it enough that I can judge this as an almost standalone issue, even though I know it's not. But I did like it enough that I can overlook the continuity issues within this own arc.
Yep. Because let's be honest, it is all about the continuity and the history.
And
all right, so I'm like I said, looking at this issue by itself within the bubble, I liked it. I appreciated what they were trying to do. So my rating is going to be based off of the issue within the bubble. I can't say that's going to be the same thing going forward with the other issues because by the time this wraps, there's going to be if these big huge continuity issues still are existing and are somehow not explained or at least addressed in some way, then we're going to have a bigger problem. And my ratings are going to be affected by, my ratings will reflect that, I should say. So this issue by itself, like I said, the art was amazing. I loved the backstory within the bubble. So I'm going to give this 3.5.
I really like the backstory. I want to give it a 4.
All right, and over on the website, Tony gave it 4 as well. So that's going to give Detective Comics a total of 4 out of 5 Batarangs. Let's move into our last title, which is Detective Comics Annual number 2. Detective Comics Annual number 2, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Travis Moore. This issue starts off on a rooftop in Paris, France. A happy couple celebrates their 5th anniversary. A mugger comes up from behind and demands that they give them their money and phones. Before he can use his knife, his chest is slashed twice. As the mugger's body hits the ground, the violent vigilante known as the Reaper escapes into the night. The criminal known as the Eraser screams what he did was an accident. He did not mean to erase his ex-wife's boyfriend out of existence. Batman jumps from a rooftop and subdues the criminal, telling him he has to pay for what he has done. The sounds of GCPD squad cars ring through the area, and Commissioner Gordon gets out, observing the arrest. One of the arresting officers asks Gordon why the commissioner has come all this way for a lowly arrest, and Gordon admits he likes to come out and scare the rookies. Gordon grabs a cigarette and heads to a nearby alley for a smoke. He tells a lurking Batman it has been a good summer so far. The city is not going from one crisis to another. Things are normal. Gordon tells him that he is finally able to take a vacation and relax. Back in the manor, Bruce calls for coffee as he exits the shower. Alfred hands him a cup and tells him his breakfast is ready. Alfred also mentions he has downloaded the morning newspapers on his tablet. Since Batman Incorporated is no more, Bruce has to keep his attention on international situations as well. Alfred says he could have gone to Europe and get a first-hand account of how things are if he did not cancel his European business trip. Bruce says the trip is for industrialists to pat each other on the back and ask for favors. It's not worth his time. Alfred tells him that the Batman might not be interested, but Bruce Wayne needs to make an appearance. In the middle of their conversation, Bruce curses when he reads that the Reaper has struck again. He tells Alfred he needs to grab the Black Casebook. This book is a record of all of the unusual cases and failures throughout the years. Stored in a case, he needs the information in case he needs the information in the future. He finds the section on the Reaper, whose name is Judson Caspian. He started years before Bruce started being Batman. His father told him stories about how the Reaper and how he haunted Gotham streets, punishing the guilty. The Reaper retired for many years before but returned to Gotham with his daughter. It was then Bruce discovered who the Reaper truly was. Caspian saw his wife murdered and decided to be judge, jury, and executioner. When Caspian donned the costume again, he came in contact with Batman, and instead of choosing prison, Caspian let himself fall to his death. Bruce bets this Reaper, the new one, is a copycat. The most recent sightings of this new Reaper are in Greece, which is the same country Bruce has the International Business Conference in. Bruce informs Alfred that they are going to Europe. Bruce drives into the hotel with Sofia Zervas, heir to a banking conglomerate, who is frustrated at Bruce for bailing on her at their friend's wedding. She thanks Bruce for inviting her because she has been wanting to participate in this event for years. Alfred helps them unload the car, and he and Bruce go to their rooms. Later that night at dinner, Bruce gets hit in the face with a small piece of paper while listening to a guest speaker. He looks for the source and sees a smiling Sophia. As the evening ends, Bruce leaves the event wishing Sophia goodbye. He and Alfred are going to start their night jobs. A drunk man is walking down the street, and a group of thugs tries to rob him. However, this is a setup where Alfred is playing the part of being a drunk to drag out the new Reaper for Batman to confront. After a brief tussle, the two become separated, and Bruce and Alfred regroup at the auxiliary Batcave in Crete. Bruce takes the Reaper's mask and analyzes it to see if the mask is sending data back to its source. He determines where the Reaper is and heads out for round 2. After finding a hidden entrance in a bookstore, he encounters a waiting Reaper. Batman disarms and unmasks him, only to realize that the person is a decoy. Julian Caspian, Judson's son, walks into the room and says he is resurrecting the Reapers. Julian tells Batman he has created a global network of Reapers to be the tools of vengeance. And as a special surprise, Julian created the elite Reaper Prime for Batman. Batman defeats Reaper Prime and swears to dismantle Julian's network. However, Reaper Prime had a failsafe and is going to detonate himself with the goal of killing Batman. Batman is able to escape the explosion, carrying the Reaper he beat to be given to the police. The end. Okay, so the Reaper, if you're not familiar, the Reaper was a character that popped up in Batman Year 2 back in the day. I have to say that, I can't say that this was an original thought necessarily, because this was something that Tony said in his review, but this issue was kind of like, very, very formatic, and is probably the best way to put it. That's not what Tony said, but that's what I'm saying. In the sense of, like, there was no real... Obviously, annuals typically are standalone stories. They don't have a cliffhanger. They don't normally continue. Sometimes they're a continuation of the current story that's going on. This was obviously not one of those situations. However, I do think that there could have been some better twists. The fact that it just happened to be a unknown son of Judson Caspian, kind of like, but he had a daughter. Why didn't we make the daughter the Reaper?
Well, because then it would be Mask of the Phantasm, and you'd get 0 points for originality.
Well, but that would have been an easy way to do... Well, okay, I won't say that. I was going to say it could be an easy way to actually bring Andrea Beaumont into main continuity, which would be better than what we're getting with the Arkham Knight. But I digress. I will say that I understand the idea of what they were trying to do here. It's just the problem is that it feels too common, I guess. Like, there's not really a surprise. The surprise here, of course, was that it was his son, but we didn't know he had a son. We knew he had a daughter, but we didn't know he had a son. So, okay, there's a surprise that he had a son, but he's created an organization of Reapers that he's going to basically do exactly what the Court of Owls did. He happens to have a main Reaper, and that, or I should say he has a Talon that is basically the top tier one, once in a generation, but he calls him Reaper Prime. It's like, to be fair, this isn't like a new original story. This feels like something we've seen too many times. So I feel like there was possibility with it. There were certain aspects of it. There were certain things. I have to say that, well, okay. I guess before I go on to some of this other stuff, what did you think of the Reaper?
I spent half the issue praying, don't be Mask of the Phantasm. Don't be Mask of the Phantasm. Don't be the girl. I didn't want it to be the girl. And then, at the end, it was like, oh, I kind of wish I had been the girl. Because
out of the two possibilities, I mean, or I should say, out of the three possibilities, and the one they chose to go with was probably the least favorable.
So what was so frustrating about this issue is they built up so many facets. There was the daughter that Bruce had been in love with. There was Sophia, who was mad at him but looked like she was kind of flirty. There was the weird fan who wanted Bruce's autograph. They spent quite a bit of time talking about him, like a whole page about him. And then all that came to nothing, and it was, it's the son you didn't know about, and there's a million Reapers, and now everyone's exploded, and to be continued, but not really. So, it was a little bit of it wasn't set up as a good detective story, because there was no clues, there was nothing to follow that made the ending make any kind of sense.
Well, really what it was they just had, they tried to plant so many red herrings that ultimately, as red herrings typically are, have nothing to do with the story.
Yeah.
But there was nothing to actually lead you to try to solve the mystery before the mystery was revealed.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I had. I mean, to be fair, I don't mind if I figure out the surprise of the story beforehand, because I'm doing, I'm diving into, I'm delving into what's on the page. If there's more to what we're seeing, it's like the layers of writing. Can you tell a story that's not just face value? If you can, and you're telling this other story, and there's something else to be seen, if you really, really get into it, that's the kind of stories that I really, really like. This was not that at all. This was, I'm trying to tell a multi-layered story by showing you all these different things, but none of them have anything to do with the last bit of the reveal. And that's the problem. I don't know.
Because even when they revealed who the guy was under the mask, that still wasn't even really it. And it's like, okay. This keeps going.
It just keeps going. And then, of course, to be fair, I will say the idea that he's not actually dead, Julian, that is, he's not actually dead. He's, potential of bringing him back in the future is there. I'm not opposed to that. I just think the concept of him following in his dad's footsteps and doing this thing where he creates basically a Court of Owls replica and trains somebody to be the best one of the group, that aspect I don't like, but I like the idea that they kind of left it open-ended in the sense of it could be picked up if they wanted it to be. I don't want it to be, but I like that it could be.
It's just weird that Tomasi wrote another giant conspiracy of fighters story while writing a giant conspiracy of fighters story.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's because he's so good at conversation and interaction. In fact, I enjoyed most of the issue at the beginning because I loved his interaction with Alfred. I had never heard of Sophia. I liked her. The stupid fan. I was actually intrigued. I was invested in the story at first because of how I like how he writes character dialogue. It seems like he should, I don't know, go more in that route. Write an actual detective story or write a story about the Bat family or something for the annual.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Tomasi, and I've said this before, especially when Ian has said that he is not a huge fan of Tomasi, some of the stuff that I best remember Tomasi for is the stuff where he has the Bat family interacting with each other. Obviously he was on Batman and Robin for a very, very long period of time. He's told probably more stories involving Damian and Batman than anybody else. And I think he writes those character interactions between the father and the son, the father and the surrogate son. I think those are the things he excels in. The interactions between Batman and Alfred. Those are the stories that Tomasi does very well. To be fair, up until we actually get to Europe, I think that everything is really, really interesting. It's like world building, and this is the kind of stuff that an annual is great at because it has the extended page count. It has the ability to have more time to kind of flesh out, the idea of building the world around Batman. We see Gordon. I have to say, one of the things that I thought was super cool was the Eraser popping up. I didn't even know who the Eraser was until the Lego Batman movie came out, and there was a Lego Batman, or part of the minifigs that were released there was an Eraser figure, and I was like, okay, I don't know who this is, and I had to go look and figure out who it was, because it's such an obscure character that hasn't really popped up. The idea that he basically came up with a more current version of the Eraser still made it relevant, still made it work, and then had him as like this kind of like one-off character that Batman takes down. That was cool. Mm-hmm. I liked that. I liked the fact that he had this character of Sophia, like this character who's kind of like giving Bruce some crap about, bailing on him, but then Bruce decides he's still going to take her with. I thought the possibility of having this character around could be interesting. It kind of conflicts with what we're hoping for to happen with Catwoman, obviously, but it's like, it's just building this idea of Bruce not having to be in the cowl all the time.
Yeah.
And having these other interactions. One of the things that was super cool about Batman Incorporated was that because he had to travel from America to France to England to Australia to Japan. Like, he had to travel all over the place. You saw these interactions with other characters, other people that you never saw. And I like those. I like that kind of stuff. I like the idea of building the world within the Batman universe outside of Gotham City, outside of the core group of characters that we typically see from everybody. I like that kind of stuff. And this was like 60% that, and then the other 30% was just kind of like a ho-hum, who's behind the mask, oh, big reveal, it's nobody.
It's nobody.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like Sophia. I loved that Eraser bit. That was awesome. And the interactions between Bruce and Alfred were great. It's just the massive black case books, the case that he had to work on was just kind of like, blah, okay. And honestly, I'm not sure why. So those unfamiliar with the black case book, the black case book is supposed to be meant for like the cases that are unsolved that he needs to come back to. This is not that kind of thing.
No,
like,
the guy died.
The Reaper would be like a case closed situation. Not a, oh my gosh, this is one of my biggest mysteries that I need to go back to. Conveniently, only because he's reappeared. So, yeah. So, I'm going to give, I don't want to spend any more time talking about this one, but this one I'm going to give a total of... I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5.
That's what I was thinking. 2.5. I did love how much time he spends out of the cowl in this issue. That was awesome. We haven't seen that in forever. But yeah, the ending is this, maybe 3. I'll be nice. 3. 3 out of 5.
All right. And over on the site, Tony gave it 2. So that's going to give Detective Comics Annual Number 2 a total of 2.5 out of 5 Batarangs. That is all of our in-depth reviews. Let's jump over to the site for Greater Gotham. Starting off with May 15th, main TBU books. We already talked about Batman number 71, Nightwing number 60. Rick Grayson and the Nightwings investigate an elemental arsonist that is targeting cops. Sebastian reviewed this and gave it 4 out of 5. No secondary TBU books. Main DC Universe books, Justice League number 24. As the League returns to the Sixth Dimension's Earth, how does Batman factor into the final confrontation? This is reviewed by Andy. He gave it 4 out of 5. Teen Titans number 30, in the aftermath of the Terminus Agenda showdown with Deathstroke, the Teen Titans Fracture. This was reviewed by Ian. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. Secondary DC Universe books, Aquaman number 48. Batman appears briefly alongside the Justice League in the issue. Moving over to May 22nd, main TBU books, Batgirl number 35, as Batgirl is occupied with escaping a death trap at the hands of the Terrible Trio. Her personal life as Barbara Gordon faces several setbacks. This is by Paul. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. Detective Comics, we already talked about. Batman Beyond, this is secondary TBU books. Batman Beyond number 32, as Terry continues to battling Split, Bruce's increasingly odd behavior baffles Matt and Melanie. This is by Andy. He gave it 3 out of 5. No main DC Universe books. Secondary DC Universe books. Action Comics number 1011. Tiger from Spiral, Huntress, and Manhunter all appear in the issue as the story builds towards Event Leviathan. Justice League Dark number 11. Man-Bat continues to appear as the member of a team. Moving over to May 29th, main TBU books, Catwoman Annual number 1. After teaching a group of women the tricks of the trade, Catwoman finds herself in the middle of a murder-suicide case. This is by Andy. He gave it 4 out of 5. We already talked about the Detective Comics Annual, secondary DC... secondary TBU books. Batman Last Night on Earth, number 1. Batman tries to get his bearings in a post-apocalyptic world with nothing but an old batsuit and Joker's talking head in a jar to help him. This is by Adele. He gave it 4.5 out of 5. Main DC Universe books. Dog Days of Summer, number 1. The DC Universe celebrates both summer and pets as this special tells 8 animal-themed stories featuring a cast of DC's animal characters. This is by Paul. He gave it 2.5 out of 5. Doomsday Clock, number 10. Dr. Manhattan's actions that led to the changes in the universe are revealed as he takes a moment to remember all of his memories from the first time he arrived in DC's multiverse. This is by Jessica. She gave it 4 out of 5. Heroes in Crisis, number 9. Wally West tries to come to terms with what has happened and gets to a little help from some friends. This is by Adele. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. Superman Leviathan Rising, number 1. As dark forces gather around him, Superman decides to allow himself to be kidnapped with unexpected results. This is by Ian. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. And just as a pickup, if you have not been reading Action Comics for, I guess, since January, and you are planning on reading Event Leviathan, I strongly suggest you check out the Superman Leviathan Rising number 1 review, because there's a recap of all of the issues of Action Comics that have touched on Leviathan, as well as the chapter that popped up in Year of the Villain at the beginning of May, and then obviously the issue itself. But basically that entire review recaps everything that's leading up to Event Leviathan, as it's right around the corner, because it comes out as you're listening to this the following Wednesday. So be aware of that. And then as far as secondary DC Universe books, there were none that week. And then to wrap up, TBU trades and hardcovers released over the past 2 weeks include Batgirl Volume 5, The Art of the Crime trade paperback, Justice League Odyssey Volume 1, The Ghost Sector trade paperback, Suicide Squad Volume 8, Ledger Manin. I feel like either that's a typo or I don't know what I've never seen that word before. I don't know what it is. Trade paperback. No, I already said that. Teen Titans by Jeff Johns, Book 3, trade paperback. Absolute Batman, The Black Mirror, hardcover. Justice League of America, The Bronze Age Omnibus, Volume 3, hardcover. The Outsiders by John Winnick, Book 1, trade paperback. Batman Hush, DC Essential Edition, trade paperback. Legends of the Dark Knight, Michael Golden, hardcover. And DC Superhero Girls Spaced Out, trade paperback. Those are all the books. If you heard me give a rating and say that somebody reviewed it, those books, I should say, all have reviews over on the site every single week. Wednesday, all the main Batman books. Thursday, every Greater Gotham books, specifically all the allies and villains within the Batman universe. And then on Friday, all the DC Universe titles that we cover at TBU. That is the breakdown of when you can find those reviews over on the site. There's tons of reviews coming up, and there's a ton of books that are popping up. Even though Heroes in Crisis has ended, we still have Event Leviathan right around the corner. There's new miniseries kicking off, and then we assume that Batman Damned is going to be wrapping up. So there's a lot of books. The point is there's lots of stuff. So if you were unaware, even though I make complaints that there's less books, I end up eating my words, because then there ends up a couple months later being more books than there ever was before. So that being said, those are all those. Real quick, I was going to skip it, but let's just do it anyway. What was one of the books from the past 2 weeks that you really enjoyed?
Well, I enjoyed half of Last Night on Earth, and then I got to the middle and decided I didn't like it anymore. But Dog Days of Summer was it was cute, but I felt like every story had like a worldview, or agenda is not the word I want, but a point of view or a soapbox that they wanted to say something, and they told it in a very interesting way, and I really enjoyed every story. I was a little afraid because I hadn't read the summary. I was afraid that it was called Dog Days of Summer, and the first story is about crypto, so I was afraid every story would be about a dog. But it wasn't, and I enjoyed it. I really liked the art. I enjoyed the different stories. Like the Croc story was really, really interesting. I liked that one a lot. I just enjoyed it a lot.
I will say about the Dog Days of Summer issue, the Backhouse story was interesting. I say this because, let's be honest, I mean, there's only so many things you can do with a cow that wears a Batman cowl, or a cape, I should say, a cape. But there's only so many things you can do. And I was completely thinking that it was going to be a pile of trash. And I say that because Dan DiDio was the writer attached to the story, and I was like, oh, God, what is he going to do with this character? But to be fair, it actually wasn't that bad. I don't know exactly why somebody thought it would be a great idea at a rodeo to paint a bull to look like the Joker. But if you can get past that, then, it's not actually so bad. So, I mean... I
really like the story with Ferdinand where he's working the grill and he's struggling with the morality of making burgers.
This existential crisis of, I'm making burgers for people who eat meat, and I'm a bull. What is wrong? I need to figure this out. Like, what? This is what, I mean, like, and you're absolutely right, though. Like, every story had some sort of strange agenda that they were trying, not that they were trying to push it, but, like, show a point of view, essentially. And it was interesting.
It was. And so it presented a point of view without really, like, rubbing your face or making it horrible. Like, some Ghibli movies are a little like, you must save nature or we will all die, which is probably true. But these were lovely. Or at least interesting.
And I will say, like, the summer special that they had last year was, like, all villains focused, and it came out at the end of July, I believe. And, like, that one wasn't bad. And I think, again, it's... A lot of these... we didn't... The last anthology that came out was the Valentine's Day one. We didn't cover it because there was no TBU characters, connected to it, so we didn't cover it. But I will say that, like... It really just, it feels like every single one of these anthologies that comes out, and I'll be honest, I didn't read the Valentine's Day one, but I did read the other ones, like the Villains one last year. There was the Halloween one, and then there was the Nuclear Holiday one. I read those. I've read those, and the thing is, I think that ultimately it really does feel like half the stories work really well. The other half are just kind of like, they were there. And they weren't bad, but, they weren't, like, great stories. And I feel like that's true of, like, almost every single one of these anthologies. Like, there's always, like, moments within each anthology that are like, oh, that's a really good story. Those were really good. And then there's other ones where it's just like, okay. And I like, honestly, the Beast Boy one was just kind of like, I didn't really care for it. I mean, it wasn't bad, and I don't think the art was bad or anything like that. It just was kind of like... This is what we did with Beast Boy. I mean, like, you could have done a lot of other things with Beast Boy, but this is what you did, okay? I mean, that's that.
I thought that one was a little cute, but yeah, that probably was one of the weaker ones in there.
Yeah, and I didn't like the crypto one that much either. I thought it was kind of, like, okay, great, man's best friend. Oh, okay, great. There's two different species who can be friends. I mean, like, again, there was nothing necessarily inherently bad about it, but it just was like, it was just average. So I think by no means should you skip reading these if you have the opportunity. I definitely think you should check them out if you have the opportunity. Yes. But it is kind of like half and half. So I mean, like of course the downfall is that there's a higher price tag on these, and that of course is going to sway some people's decision, because if you're getting a larger issue but only half of it is is good, is it really worth that higher price point? So I completely understand that. My pick for this, I almost wanted to skip this because I feel like I'm going to end up spending too much time talking about either one of my picks. And I'll just say this. I wanted to talk about Doomsday or Heroes in Crisis. I don't really want to delve into Doomsday too much. It was really just to say I like that they're starting to explain
Everything.
Manhattan's effect and how it kind of makes sense with... Which, let me be clear here. Somehow, Dr. Manhattan happens to be DC editorial over the course of 80 years. He literally is like the editorial team behind DC Comics. I mean, like it's really interesting how it all just happens to line up like that. I feel like there's a reason behind that.
So
I don't know what it is.
Is he meaning to do all that he's doing, or is it just kind of his presence is screwing the universe?
I think it's his presence.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I'm viewing it. I'm
yeah.
viewing it as like he's there, he's doing something, and it's shifting things, and he's trying to figure out why it's happening, but he's not figuring it out. And by the time he does, it just because like if you like the first time it happens in the 30s when Superman first shows up, the next time it happens is like in the mid 50s, and then it doesn't happen again until the Crisis in the 80s. So like it's spaced out, and then all of a sudden it starts happening more frequently, more recently.
Yeah.
Which again conveniently has to do with the same editorial decisions. I love how it's explaining this. It's like Jeff Johns saying editorials makes some of the worst decisions possible. I mean, I know he's not saying that, but I know that, I mean, like, let's be honest, it's lining up perfectly. So there's that. So I like that aspect. I didn't want to go too much into it because I know we still have 2 issues left, and honestly, this is probably one of the ones that we probably need to do, like a look back of all 12 issues because it's been such a long time that this series has been spread out. But Heroes in Crisis, however, that wraps up, and to be honest, okay. I won't say that I was... To be fair, Heroes in Crisis is not something that I never had any, like, major big feelings about. Like, I wasn't upset that Wally West killed a bunch of people. I wasn't upset that they were destroying the character of Wally West. I wasn't upset of all the people that got killed, because the thing is, I always felt like there was something else, some underlying thing to explain everything that was going on. And as we all know, being people who have read Tom King, you have to see the whole story before you can really pass any judgment. So the thing is, like, I know that there's a lot of people out there that were really, really, really upset about Wally West being this murderer. And the thing is, like, he never actually murdered anybody. Something horrible happened that he was a part of that killed a bunch of people, but it would all still, in a court of law, be considered manslaughter. It's like he lost control of his car while he was in it. Well, okay, I don't know if you get manslaughter for that, but it'd be like running over somebody because you didn't see them because they were running across the street. That would be manslaughter. That's what happened. He ran out of the building. This thing happened, and that's that. The one thing that I have to say about the final issue is that it does conveniently wrap up and not really have any real effects on any part of the DC universe at all. I mean, Wally West is, as we assume, sitting in a jail cell or whatever. And I'm sure they
did kill quite a few, and I was always expecting them to like go back in time and save everyone, and they really didn't. Like Roy is dead. Yeah,
and I will say that. I mean, like, that's the other thing. Roy is the character that, well, okay, to be fair, all of the characters who died, I didn't really have any super attachment to. Roy is probably one of the few characters out of the group that is actually legitimately a bigger name.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, Poison Ivy died, but then Poison Ivy, she is somehow reborn as this crazy
plant
seedling
lady
character. I mean, to be fair, it reminds me of that Poison Ivy Cycle of Life and Death miniseries where she had like the babies, and yeah, I don't want to think about that. It's a good series. You should check it out if you haven't. But it reminds me of that. But the other part of it is I keep thinking of like the people who died, and like I completely forgot that Roy died. Every time I brought it up, and people were like, "Oh, well, what about Roy?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess Roy died," and I forgot about that. Because, I mean, it's been some time. It's been 9 months since he died. And, I mean, we even had a funeral in Green Arrow, and I guess at the time I just kept telling myself this isn't actually what's going to end up being the final thing. So I think I just worked myself into thinking, well, he didn't actually die. So I didn't really think about it. But, yeah, there are obviously people who are dead, and Wally's, in jail or receiving punishment in whatever way he's going to be punished. But, like, the thing is, this is another example of DC marketing Tom King's stories in a very strange way that ultimately kind of falls short in the payoff of the series. So at the beginning of Heroes in Crisis, or at least when they were promoting it last year at San Diego, they kept pushing the fact that this was a crisis. This was a crisis. It's a crisis, everyone. You hear that? It's a crisis, just like all those other crises that DC's had in the past. It's a crisis. And, like, obviously the first issue happened, and then we saw all these dead bodies, and then we see some of the ramifications, like Roy's funeral and Green Arrow, and you're sitting there thinking, crap, this is, a crisis in the sense of there's a bunch of characters dying, like other crises, but none of this has anything to do with the story that Tom King was trying to tell. Tom King was trying to tell a story of how people deal with hardship, and sometimes the hardship can be too much for them to bear alone, but they need to seek help from others. And Wally wasn't seeking help, and ultimately this horrible thing happened because he didn't seek help. That's honestly, in my opinion, what he was trying to tell as his story. The thing is, that's a very it's not narrow. Narrow is not the right word. It's more like this is a very character specific story that is not like a massive event-wide universe-changing story that DC tried to push this to be. And that's my biggest complaint. It just comes down to Tom King was trying to tell a story about how sometimes things are too hard to handle on your own, and you need to ask for help, because if you don't, things could turn out worse. And that's not a bad story to tell. But when the company who's publishing the story decides to turn it into something larger than it really is, that's the biggest problem. And, as we know from Batman number 50, they've already done this before. We've seen this exact same thing with, the wedding's happening. Look, we've got these wedding preludes. Oh, look, these other issues are reflecting the fact that there's a wedding happening. And then what happens? The wedding doesn't happen. And then people are let down. And while I'm not let down by the end of this series, it doesn't feel like this massive event type book that DC really tried to make it into. And that was my only real downfall of the title. I don't think that I think that Tom King's message was a good message to tell. The only complaint I had against Tom King was I saw in an interview that he said that he comes up with a concept for a story, pitches it to DC Editorial, and then lets DC Editorial fill in the blanks of which characters to use. And I saw that and I was like, what? So, what? And he basically said that Editorial was the one who decided to use Wally in the place where Wally is, and to use Booster and Harley as the characters that they were, and to kill off the characters that were killed off. And that was a very strange thing to read, because I thought to myself, Wally was meant to be like this beacon of hope for the DC universe when Rebirth started, and if DC Editorial believes that this is the direction that they need to go with Wally, where Wally's now this character whose hope was completely misguided in the sense of he's got this horrible situation where he ends up killing a bunch of people, what is DC Editorial ultimately, in the larger scheme of things, saying about the way they view the idea of Rebirth? So,
I'm gonna have to go back and read it all together, because I was a little lost, and I think Booster's plan was a little weird, but I guess they acknowledged that in the story. That's does that make sense to you? No, but don't worry, it'll work out. But yeah, I did like it, and thankfully, I don't pay too much attention to the promotional material, so I probably wasn't as disappointed as some people. But yeah, it was a very interesting story, and I do like that Tom King's not afraid to tell psychological stories or stories about pain. That
is honestly one of the biggest downfalls of running a website. to the detail that we do, because I see so much of this stuff and I'm affected by it like so much. And like sometimes I wish that I could just read something and enjoy it the way it is without reading too much. And a lot of times the DC stuff that we cover, like Heroes in Crisis is a good example, but the problem is I still see stuff. But like Event Leviathan, I'm kind of going into that a little blind. I've read the stuff leading up to it, like I've read the Superman Leviathan Rising, but I'm kind of going into that blind in the sense of I haven't read all the stuff that's been in Action Comics. I don't know the entire backstory, so there's like that part of it. But the problem is, I know this happens every time. I'm not reading any of it going into it. I go into it kind of like blind, like, okay, cool, because we don't really report a lot of the news outside of like, just announcing the issues and saying that we're going to cover it. We don't cover like every single interview that the writers do. We used to do that back in the day, but honestly, I feel like that does affect reading some of this stuff. And if you want to find that stuff, you're going to seek it out anyway. But I'm going into Event Leviathan kind of blind, thinking this is going to be a really cool story. But the problem is, by like halfway point, I'm like itching for more Event Leviathan issues, and because it's a month in between, you start reading stuff to kind of fill in the gaps, and then that's what screws me up. So, my own fault. It's my own fault. But anyway. All right, so that's Greater Gotham this time around. If you guys have any opinions on any of the books that we specifically mentioned as part of Greater Gotham, or Dog Days of Summer, Doomsday Clock, or Heroes in Crisis, be sure to leave those comments in the comment section. We'll talk about those on the next episode. I have said this multiple times in the past about how I would love to do collected version reviews of some of this stuff. The idea was to do some of it for our Patreon supporters, but I think that ultimately what we probably need to do is just get some other staff members who are interested in discussing some of these stories as a complete whole, and maybe release some more other, like some extras comic cast episodes, or bring back TBU specials and do some over there or something, because I think a lot of these stories, like I've said in the past, they do they're best explored when you talk about them as a whole.
Yeah.
They're very rarely the best story when you talk about them issue by issue, and that's just the way it's been for like the last 10 years. Honestly, miniseries are not as good when they are not collected, and obviously a lot of the writers at DC is like seeking out to write stuff, obviously write better for the trade too. So there's that. So speaking of our Patreon supporters, thank you to our Patreon supporters. We've entered a new month of June, and our Patreon supporters are probably saying, hey, didn't last month Dustin say he was going to get caught up, and he actually did get caught up, but then he fell behind again. And I'm going to say, yes, I apologize. Like I said, because I was on vacation for about 2 weeks, I was unable to get a lot of other stuff. However, we did release a new episode, or one of the new shows that we released is led up by Ian and Paul, and they're talking about, it's called TBU Cold Cases. This is you'll get one episode per month if you're at the minimum $3 tier. This is going to dive into a lot of the lesser known comic stories. So that will be one of them. You'll still get a TBU Raw. There actually was a TBU Raw that released over the past 2 weeks as well. That was one of the episodes that I was able to get out. And as you're listening to this, a new episode of Phantom in Crisis, which is dealing with the Snyder Cut, the long-awaited Snyder Cut episode that I dreaded for so long, has finally arrived and is available for all our Patreon supporters at the $10 or up levels. And then TBU Extra will be coming probably this week as well. So we'll get caught up from the episodes from May, and then we already have plans for a lot of the stuff for the month of June. And as a thank you to our Patreon supporters, I'm planning on releasing an extra episode of TBU Extra in June to kind of make up for the fact that you guys have put up with me and my promises of trying to get caught up for so long. So I'm going to try to get out an extra episode of TBU Extra, in addition to, maybe even trying to get ahead, so that way we don't run into this situation. So thank you to our supporters. Thank you, Colt, Robert, Donald, Brendan, Ian, Stanton's Grave, Arturo, Irwin, Captain America, Jay, Dutton, Real No Deuces, and Cody. Thank you all for your support, and as well as the support at the lower level as well. We greatly appreciate all of the support that we get. If you are currently not a supporter, by all means, we encourage you to. You'll get extra episodes of content from us in addition to everything that we already offer for free over on the site, as far as all the other podcasts and content that we offer. But in addition to that, if you are unable to support us monetarily, or you don't want to do Patreon, you could do a one-time donation to PayPal. So click that Support TBU link on the homepage, and you'll see all kinds of different ways. We have a merch shop that you can purchase stuff through, and we get proceeds from that as well. That helps us out. So the biggest thing is, if you are unable to support us monetarily, we understand. We are fully aware that not everybody who listens to the podcast can give money. But, however, if you have skills and talents that you wish to share with other Bat fans to build up this massive community that we've been building for the last 11 plus years, we are always looking for more people to help support TBU in other ways, like volunteering your time. We're always looking for audio editors, video editors, specifically video editors, because we'd love to get more YouTube content created, but we need people to actually volunteer their time to do the video editing, because we don't have the funds to manage to pay an editor to do stuff like that. We're also currently looking for about 2 or 3 more comic book reviewers to kind of fill in some of the upcoming titles that are releasing in the next couple of months. We're looking to fill those and then have some alternates for people. If you're interested in writing news articles, there's always news articles popping up, whether it be movies, TV, merchandise, video games, comics. There's all kinds of news happening all the time. So we're always looking for new people to help us out with that kind of stuff. If you're a graphic designer or a web developer and you'd like to volunteer your time with that kind of stuff, we would love to refresh the website. I'm sure a lot of people would love a refresh of the website, but again, that costs money, and we don't have a ton of money to spend on this kind of stuff. So a lot of the stuff that you see on the site or projects that are happening is all volunteered by staff members, and a lot of the funds that we raise through Patreon immediately pay for maintenance stuff that we have to do on the site, or the actual hosting for the site, because let's be honest, we have a massive back catalog of podcast episodes that take a massive amount of server space, and we just keep adding more shows, which, the common sense would say, well, stop adding shows or get rid of the old shows, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that all that stuff is available for Bat fans to listen to, and I guess listen for the rest of eternity, I guess is the best way to put it. So, any support is greatly appreciated. But if you are so inclined to help out in any way, or you have ideas that you'd like to share with how we can get in touch, like let's say you yourself don't have any of those skills that I mentioned, but you know people who would be interested in helping, or you want to point us in the direction of people that could be helping, I'm more than happy. I have no problem admitting that even though I've been running the site as long as I have, a lot of the times I don't, because of all the upkeep on the site itself, I don't have time to seek out new avenues of different possibilities of getting people to work on the site and things like that. So if you have ideas that you'd like to share, or even better, you have other content creators out there that you think would be a good fit for TBU, shoot me their information, shoot me, how to find their content and things like that, because we're always looking for new people to come on board and work with TBU. And obviously, special thanks goes out to all of our current staff members. There's a massive group of them, and if you are so inclined to chat with any of them, join our Discord, because a lot of them are constantly present on our Discord and are chatting with all of the other Bat fans that are part of the community as well. So that long-winded brings us to our question and answer.
Boy, did you get a wrong number. Leave your message at the sound of the shriek. No, please, don't!
Which, I'm going to be honest, I appreciate that there are a bunch of comments here, but we've met our time limit, and I'm not going to forget all these comments. I'm going to touch the longest comments, because a lot of the comments or the questions that are asked are actually stuff that we've discussed earlier, and I want to talk about this. So we're gonna pull up one question. I'm going to talk this one question, and then the rest of them we're just going to push to the next episode. And I promise you, we will get to them and we will cover them. We just won't do it this time around, because let's be honest, there's 3 books and a crap ton of news. So All right, listener Q&As. The one and only question we're going to cover comes from Kalinsky, and they say, maybe you will cover it in the news, but what do you think will be Tom King's big change, and will it still happen now that after he got sacked at Batman? He was asked on Twitter whether Batman Catwoman series will be in continuity, and he said 100% yes, so it seems likely, I guess. Apparently, he had to ask Warner Brothers and AT&T to get permission for that change, so it has to be quite fundamental. A lot of people speculate that it has to be the wedding for real now, but I had a whole different idea, which doesn't even exclude a wedding. What if he wants to change Batman's vow or even dismiss it? The vow is often mentioned in King's Run, Selina admitting to Talia that she will always be second to his childish vow, which kind of foreshadowed the result of the wedding, and when Claire and Batman talk in number 24, she asks him what he would do, and he avoids that question. That it doesn't matter what he wants, it only matters what she wants. He also says that it doesn't matter what I like, and admits that he doesn't like being Batman. He is Batman because he is Batman. It sounds mundane, but in reality, Batman doesn't really have a choice because of his vow. It rules and restricts his life in every possibility. His vow was, I swear by the spirit of my parents to avenge their deaths by the warning on all criminals. It's not something you do casually. It requires a full commitment. A commitment Dick Grayson didn't want to give and therefore became Nightwing. His vow is also the reason why he is the Batman and nobody else, and it is supposed to be the reason why he is better than anyone else, but it's also the reason why he can't grow up from a boy without either fulfilling or dismissing that vow, but both seem impossible right now. In number 66, the question asks, if this was your reason to make him strong, why is he so damn weak? Is his vow making him stronger or weaker? Neither Flashpoint Batman nor his real parents would have wanted this life for him, so maybe King's whole run is to make Batman realize that there is more than just a childish vow and vengeance. So, this deals with kind of what we talked about before. Obviously, we talked about the big change and how some people think it's the wedding. Some people maybe say that he's taking off the cowl and we're going to reveal who he actually is. This is an interesting idea. I mean, I'm going to kind of mold the idea of the vow into saying that he must be Batman, because that comes across a little bit more simple than the vow. The fact that he always has to be Batman, I mean, that could fall in line with the idea that he takes off the cowl. The idea that Batman gives up being Batman. I don't think that's the vision we're going in the direction of, but I do think that Batman could change his priority set. Meaning, maybe Batman's main priority isn't that he can never be... It's not that he can't ever be happy because he has to be Batman. Maybe it's that he can have both. Maybe he can still be Batman, and this whole thing that Tom King's trying to tell is that Batman learns from this entire, 100 issues, or obviously a little less than 100 issues by the time he's done, but maybe the whole point is that he's trying to tell a story of how Batman realizes that he doesn't have to be Batman and only Batman. He actually can have a life of happiness, and and Catwoman is going to, be part of that happiness that he can indulge in, I guess, is the best way to put it. I'm not saying, I don't think that's a bad idea, and I think that's entirely possible. I don't think he has to obviously reveal who he is in the case of, if that was the case, giving up the idea that he can only be Batman, in the sense of maybe if that's what Kalinsky is referring to, like the fact that he can only be Batman because of the vow, I'd be fine with that. Honestly, I feel like Batman should be able to enjoy his life, have some sort of happiness. Anytime we see a glimmer of that, it gets ripped out from underneath him. So I would really hope that maybe this is the change. Maybe the change is that he can be happy. Maybe this editorial mandate that we've heard so many times over again about how editorial doesn't want the characters to be married, which I really didn't want to spend too much time, but I have to bring this up because I thought about this recently. There was so a lot of people probably don't know this, but I'm a huge Disney fan, the parks specifically, and there was this thing that I heard recently that said that at no point in time, there's a mandate from Disney that Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse can never be married. And the reason why is because if you marry them, they can never, there's never like a goal of what they can achieve. Meaning they can, like, the goal is always, when you have a couple, the goal is always to get married. Once you get married, there is no goal. You're already married. You're already together. You can't, if you fight, there's not a conflict of the ultimate goal of getting married and things like that. So there's this mandate that they can never be married. There can never be a story where they get married. Also, there's this other thing that has to do with Warner Brothers, where there's these specific rules with Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, where one of the main rules is that Wile E. Coyote can never ever catch the Roadrunner. It goes against the basis of the characters, because if he does catch the Roadrunner, then you are entering in a whole different thing. It's the same idea of, like, you can never have the characters get married. Batman, I think, for Warner Brothers and obviously AT&T, I don't think AT&T is really thinking about this to the level that it was described in the interview, but I think that Warner Brothers and DC, they have viewed their characters in the same sense of Warner Brothers with Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, or Disney with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. They're viewing their characters like, if you change a specific principle of the character, it's a massive change that changes the idea of who the character is, and it's a character that's been around for so long. Changing some sort of principle like that is too much for the character to... It's too much change. You know, it's one thing to say that Batman's dating somebody for an extended amount of time. It's a whole other thing to say that he's settling down with somebody. And in that regard, when I thought about it, you know, obviously I don't agree with it. But when I thought of when I was brought these other examples of, like, the Mickey and Minnie, the Roadrunner and Coyote, when I looked at these other situations, I thought to myself, you're absolutely right. I can see from a corporate perspective why you wouldn't want these characters married, why you would want these characters to, like, hold true to these, not principles, but, like, these characteristics that are so common with the characters. The problem is that when you're talking about Mickey and Minnie Mouse, which are cartoon characters, Roadrunner and Coyote, which are also cartoon characters, and honestly aren't really appearing that many times in media now anyway, compared to Batman, who has been adapted into live-action films, animated films, has a comic book telling stories, multiple comic books telling stories every single month. You have to change these characters. You look at a character within, like, the Star Wars universe, which obviously originated as a live-action film, and then now is appearing in comics and cartoons and other films. Those characters evolve.
Yeah.
That's what happens, because they're real characters. And Batman, obviously, is not a real character. He's still a fictional character, but he's more real than a cartoon character is. So you have to be able to figure out some way of adapting these characters. So if Tom King's intention is to give Batman some sort of evolution of the character, I'm for it. And honestly, I don't even really care what it is. I mean, I hope it's the wedding. I hope that maybe it's this vow thing that Kalinski's talking about. I hope it's something related to that, but I just want to see the character evolve, because honestly, if the character doesn't evolve and it's just the same stories, just a different time period, what's the point? I, as a fan, want to see these characters evolve. There's a reason why the Marvel movies are so successful. You see the process of these characters evolving over the course of multiple films. You know, and Batman is one of those characters. Not obviously in the Marvel movies, but Batman is a character who should be evolving. We should be seeing changes, permanent changes. That needs to happen. If there's no evolution of the character, what's the point of tuning in every single month to pick up a new issue? What's the point? If you don't ever change, and it's just, well, this Batman's fighting this villain for the next couple issues, why? What's the point? I mean, and I'm saying this as like a overall theory on the entire point of what we're doing at TBU. Like, if these characters don't have the ability to change or can never change, and they have to be this same character, why? What are we all here for? What are we watching every single day? Are we just here to read a story, and the story's done, and then it's going to start again, and it's a new story that is the same thing but a different villain? I don't want that. So I want some sort of change, and I want things to, evolve. So I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, because especially in Detective Comics, our comments are always, "Oh, we've seen this before. Oh, this story again," or "Oh, it was almost Mask of the Phantasm, but it just wasn't." If you change some core aspect of the character, you can tell those stories again, and this time they would come out differently. It wouldn't be the same story because how the character reacts and what they do and how they handle it would be different. And that, when you're running out of story ideas, is not a bad thing. Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I necessarily, because if you think about it, not dismissing the vow, but changing his vow and maybe taking a night off now and then, that would, can you imagine the bat signal going off and Bruce going, Damien's got it. I'm busy. I'm watching a movie with my wife. I don't necessarily see that happening because I still think, even though he made the vow, I still see Batman as someone who strives for justice, and if he can do something about it, he will. But maybe, maybe he'll go more about doing it as Bruce Wayne, because that's one thing we've also, maybe not we've talked about, but I know it's been talked about on the cast, is Bruce Wayne can do awesome things as Bruce Wayne. And maybe that's the route they'll go, is more on the Bruce side than the fighting side. Maybe. If he changes his vow, or maybe something fundamental changes about him. Because I miss Bruce. I can't even count how few times he's been out of the cowl in Batman.
Yeah, that's true. And the thing is, there's been plenty of writers over the past 10 years who have tried to figure out ways of having Batman make a difference as Bruce Wayne. We've seen that with Batman Incorporated. Scott Snyder hinted at it, before Death of the Family kind of torpedoed that. The revitalization of Amusement Mile. There's been plenty of times where they've tried to do it, but it just either the story aspect of that side of things just never comes to be, or it was just a setup for something to happen for him as he was Batman. And I don't know, I'm seeing this as like a frustrated fan. I really do want some sort of change, because telling the same stories over and over again is just, it's not enjoyable, especially for someone at the level of fandom that I am, where I'm literally running a website talking about this stuff. There's a reason, and I say this wholeheartedly. I'm not trying to put down what's happening in the comics, because I do enjoy some of the stuff that's happening in the comics, but I say this in a way where I really want to get this point across. There's a reason why when movie news comes out, that is the stuff that is the most relevant, the sought after news is way more popular than the comics, because the movies, because they're spaced out, and because it's such a huge difference between one director's vision to another director's vision, there's a reason why that stuff is so sought after. What is this director going to do that's going to be so different than the last one? What is Matt Reeves going to do that Chris Nolan didn't do? What is going to make this movie and this potential trilogy different than the last one? When you compare that to the comic book side of things, nobody looks at it because it's such a smaller scale, because of the frequency of everything that happens so much. When you look at the comics, they come out month to month. When you look at the change between Scott Snyder to Tom King, or Grant Morrison to Scott Snyder, there's not really a huge change that happens. And that's the biggest thing. What are they really telling that's so different than the last person? And I think that's why it's not as big of news. DC obviously wishes it was bigger news, because then maybe it would sell more comics. But when you look at what's happening in the comics world, it is because of the frequency of what's happening, and because of the length of time that these creators are on the titles, whether it be a short amount of time or a long period of time, there's just not a motivation for people to pay attention every single time something changes, because nothing really big that changes. You look at the movies, and of course, somebody's new in the cowl, or they're going to focus on this villain. We haven't seen this villain on screen before, or we're going to see this villain again, but we saw this villain 20 years ago. It's a big change, and that's why people talk about it, because it's a change. Those changes are big because it's more mainstream. The comics world is literally, like we've said, telling a lot of the same stories a lot of the time, and it's not that interesting to like the mainstream audience because it's not a big change. The only time you hear people from the mainstream get really excited is when something like Batman's getting married,
Yeah.
Batman gets killed, this happens, you know, so and so's dead, so and so's got a son, you know, like the big moments. These are the things that make people interested in trying to find out what's going on currently in the comics. And right now, it doesn't feel like anything like that's happening. So hopefully, whatever we get from Tom King does that. So at least he leaves an impact. So the future of the comics can be more enjoyable for maybe more mainstream people. So
Maybe he'll turn him into a vampire. And that way it'll that way it'll match the movies, right?
all right, so like I said, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other comments that we will, like I said, we'll get to on the next episode. We should have more time because obviously we only have 2 issues to cover and no solicitations, so there will be more time to cover these. But I still implore you, if you have more questions to ask, please send your questions over. If you send them over on Discord, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, just make sure you tag us and we will be sure to port them over to the website, or you can just leave them directly on the podcast post over on the site, and we will get to all those questions next time around. If you have any suggestions for a monkey watch next time around, by all means, you can certainly suggest those. If you'd like to hear us even just talk about something, you know, a topic of favorite, whatever, not necessarily Batman related, we can certainly, you know, consider that if we have time next time. But like I said, we will be sure to get to all of those questions next time around. So with that being said, be sure to head over to the site for all the latest news related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, and of course the comics. Be sure to check out all of the other podcasts that we have to offer. There's new episodes of Back with the Oracle, Everyone Loves the Drake, Everyone Loves Young Justice, which is our Young Justice centric show, Batman Books, The Dark Knight in Prose, The Bat Fans, Bat Books for Beginners. Bat Books for Beginners is going to be diving into Batgirl Redemption in next week while you're listening to this next week, so that's around the corner. And then there was a Red Robin Centrics episode that released the last time, so check those out. Like I said before, please support us if you can. Get in touch with us at TBU at thebatmanuniverse.net if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions. I think I said suggestions twice there, but anyway, I guess I'll just hammer it in, suggestions. But outside of that, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and of course join our Discord to chat with other staff members and other Bat fans from the site. And then with that, we'll be back in 2 weeks to cover the latest news and the latest comics. So with that, I am Dustin.
This is Steph.
And you've been listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.